Marlo Chen stared at the house keys trembling in her palm, then looked up at the tall man standing in front of her with that gentle smile she had come to recognize from the coffee shop. The afternoon sun caught the metal of the keys, making them gleam like something from a dream she was afraid to wake up from. "You're absolutely sure this isn't some kind of mistake?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Kevin Durant shook his head slowly, his eyes warm with the same kindness he had shown that day 3 weeks ago when his card was declined, and she had quietly slipped $4 from her tip jar to cover his coffee. "No mistake, Marlo. You paid $4 for my coffee without knowing who I was, without expecting anything in return. Now, I'm paying for your house." The words hit her like a physical force, and she felt her knees buckle slightly. Behind her, 16-year-old Zephyr stood frozen on the sidewalk, his new hearing aids allowing him to catch every word of this impossible conversation. His eyes were wide with disbelief, darting between his sister and the NBA superstar who had just handed them the keys to a 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood they had only driven through in their beat-up Honda, never imagining they could live there. "I don't understand," Marlo said, tears starting to blur her vision. "People don't just buy houses for strangers. This has to be some kind of publicity stunt, or a reality show, or—" Her voice trailed off as she looked at Kevin's face and saw nothing but genuine sincerity. "Sometimes they do," Kevin replied softly. "Sometimes a small act of kindness changes everything." But even as Marlo felt her heart exploding with gratitude and disbelief, a cold knot of fear began forming in her stomach. She thought about that moment in the coffee shop when she had lied to him, when she had pretended that paying for his coffee was no big deal, that $4 meant nothing to her. She remembered the casual way she had waved off his thanks, as if she weren't counting every penny, as if those $4 weren't literally her lunch money for the next 2 days. What would happen when he discovered the truth about who she really was? When he found out that the confident, generous barista was actually a broke nursing student who ate ramen for dinner every night and was 3 months behind on her tuition? When he realized that the girl who had acted like $4 was pocket change was actually someone who had been calculating whether she could afford to buy her diabetic brother his insulin that week. The keys felt suddenly heavy in her hand, like they might disappear if he learned how desperately she had needed his gratitude to mean something more than just a thank you. 3 weeks earlier, Marlo Chen had been wiping down the same espresso machine for the 3rd time in an hour, her movements automatic and tired. The morning rush at Grind Coffee in Oakland's Fruitvale district had been particularly brutal, and her feet ached in the worn sneakers she couldn't afford to replace. The afternoon lull gave her a moment to breathe, but even breathing felt like a luxury she wasn't sure she deserved. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a tall man in a simple hoodie and jeans walking in. Something about his posture suggested he was used to attention, but he moved with the deliberate casualness of someone trying not to attract it. Marlo had served enough customers over the past 2 years to recognize the type, usually tech work or minor celebrities who valued their anonymity. "What can I get you?" she asked, summoning her customer service smile despite the exhaustion that seemed to live in her bones these days. "Large coffee, black, and one of those blueberry muffins," he said, pointing to the display case. His voice was warm, friendly, and he made eye contact in a way that suggested he actually saw her as a person, rather than just a service provider. Marlo rang up the order. "That'll be $4 even." She watched as he pulled out his wallet and handed her a credit card. The machine beeped. He swiped it, then displayed the dreaded message she had seen too many times: "Decline." "Oh," the man said, looking genuinely embarrassed. "That's weird. Can you try it again?" She swiped the card a second time, but the machine responded with the same rejection. The man's face reddened slightly, and he began patting his pocket as if he might find cash that hadn't been there moments before. "I'm so sorry," he said, starting to back away from the counter. "I thought I had transferred money this morning. I can just come back later." Something in his tone, genuine embarrassment mixed with disappointment, struck Marlo in a way that bypassed her usual caution about money. Without thinking, she reached into the tip jar beside the register and pulled out 4 crumpled dollar bills. Her tip jar, which contained exactly $12.37, representing her lunch money for the next 3 days. "Hey, don't worry about it," she said, feeding the bills into the register and printing his receipt. "Happens to everyone. Cards are weird sometimes. The man stared at her, clearly surprised. I can't let you pay for my coffee. That's not right. It's just $4. Marlowe lied with a smile that felt natural, despite being completely fabricated. Really? It's no big deal. Enjoy the muffin. She handed him the coffee and pastry, maintaining that casual, no-big-deal expression, even as her mind was already calculating how she could stretch her remaining $8 until her next paycheck. Ramen for dinner again. Maybe she could skip lunch tomorrow and make it work. Thank you, the man said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. Seriously, thank you. That was really kind. Just pay it forward sometime, Marlowe replied, already turning back to her cleaning routine. After he left, Indira Patel, her co-worker and closest friend, emerged from the back room where she had been restocking supplies. Did you just pay for that guy's coffee out of your own money? It was $4, Indira, not exactly breaking the bank. Indira gave her the look she had perfected over the past 6 months of watching Marlowe make increasingly desperate financial decisions. Marlowe, you ate a sleeve of saltine crackers for lunch yesterday. $4 is absolutely breaking your bank. He seemed nice, Marlowe said defensively, and embarrassed. I've been there. You're there right now, Indira pointed out. When was the last time you bought yourself something that wasn't strictly necessary for survival? Marlowe couldn't answer because she couldn't remember. Every dollar that came into her life had a predetermined destination. Rent, utilities, groceries, Zephyr's medications, her nursing school tuition, book, transportation. There was no category in her budget for things like new shoes or coffee that she didn't make herself, or the kind of casual generosity she had just displayed. That evening, Marlowe climbed the 3 flights of stairs to the tiny apartment she shared with Zephyr, her legs heavy with fatigue from the double shift she had pulled. The nursing school classes she attended 4 nights a week were supposed to end at 10, but she had been studying in the library until midnight, trying to absorb material that seemed to slip through her exhausted brain like water through a sieve. Zephyr was at the kitchen table, hunched over homework with his face inches from the paper. His hearing aids, which had been acting up for weeks, sat on the table beside him. At 16, he was tall and skinny like their father had been, with the same serious expression that made him look older than his years. How was school? Marlowe asked, dropping her backpack and immediately going to the refrigerator to see what she could cobble together for dinner. Zephyr looked up at her, and she could see the frustration in his eyes. Mrs. Peterson got mad at me again for not participating in class discussion. I tried to explain that I can't hear half of what anyone is saying, but she thinks I'm just not paying attention. Marlowe's heart clenched. Zephyr's hearing aids were 3 years old and barely functional. The insurance their parents had carried died with them in the car accident 2 years ago, and the state insurance Marlowe had managed to get for Zephyr covered almost nothing related to his hearing loss. New hearing aids would cost $8,000, money that might as well have been $8 million for all the accessibility it had in Marlowe's world. I'll call the school tomorrow, Marlowe said, though she knew from experience that it would accomplish nothing. Maybe we can work something out with your teachers. It's not their fault, Zephyr signed, his hands moving with the fluid grace that had become their primary mode of communication. I need better hearing aids. We both know it. Marlowe opened the refrigerator and stared at its sparse contents. A half-empty container of milk that was probably a day past its expiration date, some leftover rice from 2 nights ago, and 3 eggs. In the cabinet, she found a package of ramen noodles and some hot sauce. It would have to do. As she cooked, her phone buzzed with an email notification. Her stomach dropped as she saw the sender, Oakland Community College Financial Aid Office. She opened it with trembling fingers, though she already knew what it would say. Dear Ms. Chen, this is your final notice regarding your outstanding tuition balance of £4,247. Payment must be received by Friday, October 15th, or you will be withdrawn from all classes and banned from re-enrollment until the balance is paid in full. Friday, 3 days away. Marlowe stared at the email until the words blurred together. $4,000. It might as well have been $4 million. Her savings account had exactly $43 in it. Her checking account had $112. Her next paycheck wouldn't come for another week, and it would be barely enough to cover rent. She looked at Zephyr, who was trying to fix his hearing aid with a paperclip. his face a mask of concentration and frustration. In 3 days, she would lose her chance to become a nurse. Her chance to build a better life for both of them would disappear, and they would be stuck in this cycle of barely surviving forever. "Dinner's ready," she called, her voice artificially bright. That night, after Zephyr had gone to bed, Marlo sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, scrolling through loan websites that would inevitably reject her application due to lack of credit history and income. She applied anyway, filling out form after form, knowing that each declined message was another door slamming shut. At 2 a.m., she finally closed the laptop and put her head down on the table. In the quiet of the apartment, she could hear the refrigerator humming and the upstairs neighbor's television turned up too loud. She thought about the tall man from the coffee shop, how embarrassed he had looked when his card was declined, how grateful he had seemed when she covered his bill. $4, such a small amount of money to make someone smile, to ease someone's embarrassment, to perform a tiny act of human kindness. And yet, those $4 represented a choice between lunch and generosity, between taking care of herself and taking care of a stranger. She had chosen generosity, and now she was wondering if that made her noble or stupid. The next morning brought no relief, only the grinding continuation of a routine that felt more like survival than living. Marlo's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., and she dragged herself through a shower with water that never quite got hot enough. Then, dressed in the same black pants and white shirt she wore to work every day. The uniform had been white once, but repeated washings in cheap detergent had turned it a sort of gray-white that made her look as tired as she felt. Zephyr was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, his broken hearing aids sitting beside him, like a constant reminder of everything they couldn't afford. He looked up when she entered the kitchen, and Marlo could see the question in his eyes before he even signed it. "Did you hear back from any of the loan applications?" "Not yet," Marlo lied, not wanting to tell him about the 3 rejection emails that had arrived overnight. "These things take time." Zephyr nodded, but she could see that he didn't believe her. At 16, he had developed the kind of cynicism that came from watching your older sister work herself to exhaustion, while the world remained stubbornly indifferent to your struggle. "I can get a job," he signed. "Lots of kids my age work. I could help with money." "Absolutely not," Marlo said aloud, her voice sharper than she intended. "Your job is school, period." Cheat. She had sacrificed too much to let Zephyr throw away his education the way she had been forced to scale back hers. He was smart, smarter than she was, and if anyone was going to break the cycle of poverty that had trapped them since their parents' death, it would be him. The commute to work involved 2 bus transfers and took 45 minutes each way. Marlo used the time to study, balancing her nursing textbooks on her lap, while the bus lurched through Oakland traffic. Today, she was trying to memorize the stages of wound healing for an exam she probably wouldn't be able to take if she got kicked out of school on Friday. Grind Coffee occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse in Fruitvale, surrounded by taco trucks, discount stores, and the kind of businesses that served people who counted every dollar. The neighborhood was in the middle of a slow gentrification process, with new condos and artisanal restaurants appearing alongside longtime family-owned shops and social services offices. Caspian Torres, the owner, was already there when Marlo arrived, his perpetual scowl firmly in place as he counted the register. He was a man in his 50s who treated his coffee shop like a personal kingdom, and his employees like subjects he barely tolerated. "You're 3 minutes late," he said without looking up. "The bus was delayed," Marlo replied, tying her apron around her waist. "Bus problems are your problem, not mine. If you can't get here on time, I can find someone who can." Marlo bit back the response that rose to her lips. She needed this job, needed the $18 an hour that represented the highest wage she had ever earned. Caspian knew exactly how desperate his employees were, and he wielded that knowledge like a weapon. The morning rush began immediately, a steady stream of commuters who wanted their caffeine quickly and efficiently. Marlo fell into the rhythm of grinding, steaming, and pouring, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, while her mind worried at the problem of her tuition, like a dog with a bone. Around 10 o'clock, during a brief lull, she approached Caspian at the register. "Could I talk to you for a minute?" He looked up from his inventory sheets with visible irritation. "Make it quick. I was wondering if there was any possibility of getting an advance on my paycheck. Just a partial advance. I'm having some financial difficulties and—" "No, The word came out flat and final. I'm not a bank, Chen. I'm not in the business of lending money to employees who can't manage their finance. It's not that I can't manage my finance, Marlowe said, feeling heat rise in her cheek. It's that I don't have enough money to manage. I'm a good employee. I've never been late except for today. I've never missed a shift. And you think that entitles you to special treatment? Caspian crossed his arms. Everyone who works here has money problem. That's why they work here. You want more money? Work more hours. You want an advance? Find a different job. I already work 60 hours a week between here and my other shifts. I can't work more hours. Then you can't afford whatever you're trying to buy. It's called living within your means. Marlowe stared at him, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation that came with having to explain poverty to someone who had never experienced. Living within her means would require her to give up her education, to accept that she and Zephyr would remain trapped in exactly the kind of low-wage jobs that kept people desperate enough to tolerate employers like Casp. It's for school, she said quietly. I'm 3 credits away from finishing my nursing degree. The tuition is due Friday, and if I can't pay it, I'll lose everything I've worked for. Caspian shrugged. Should have thought about that before you decided to pay for some random customer's coffee yesterday. Indira told me what you did. You want to play the generous benefactor? That's your choice. But don't come crying to me when your charity cases don't pay your bills. The words hit Marlowe like a slap. She had forgotten that in a workplace as small as grind coffee, every action was observed and reported. Her moment of kindness had become evidence of her poor judgment, ammunition for her boss to use against her. That was $4, he said. $4 you didn't have to spare, Caspian replied. And now you want me to solve the problem or bad decision created. Not happening. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forced smiles and automatic responses to customer orders. Marlowe's hands moved through the familiar motions, while her mind spun through increasingly desperate scenarios. She could sell her laptop, but it was old, and probably worth $50 at most. Could try to pick up extra shifts at the diner where she worked weekends, but they were already short-staffed, and asking for more hours might result in losing shifts rather than gaining them. By the time her shift ended at 6 p.m., Marlowe felt like she was drowning in slow motion. She had exactly 2 days to come up with over $4,000, and every avenue she explored led to another dead end. The evening nursing class was a special kind of torture. Marlowe sat in the back row of the community college classroom, surrounded by other working adults who had sacrificed everything to pursue their education. Tonight, they were learning about patient advocacy, about being the voice for people who couldn't speak for themselves in the healthcare system. Professor Martinez, a woman in her 50s who had worked as a nurse for 30 years before becoming an educator, talked passionately about the responsibility they would have as nurses to fight for their patients, to ensure that everyone received quality care regardless of their ability to pay. Healthcare is a human right, she said, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who had seen too many people suffer due to lack of access. As nurses, you will be on the front lines of that fight. You will see patients who have to choose between buying medication and buying groceries. You will advocate for people who the system wants to ignore. Marlowe thought about Zephyr, about the hearing aids he needed but couldn't afford, about the way the world became a smaller, more isolated place when you couldn't afford to participate in it fully. She thought about herself, sitting in this classroom, learning about fighting for others while being unable to fight effectively for her own family. After class, she lingered in the hallway, watching her classmates discuss study groups and clinical rotation. These were her people, her chosen family, of exhausted but determined adults who understood what it meant to sacrifice everything for a chance at something better. In 2 days, she would have to tell them goodbye. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marlowe had spent the night applying for emergency hardship grants, calling every financial aid office she could find, and even researching pawn shop to see what she might be able to sell. Her laptop would bring maybe $75. Her great-grandmother's ring, the only piece of jewelry she owned with any value, might get her $200 if she was lucky. Still thousands short of what she needed. She arrived at work feeling like she was walking through a dream, everything slightly unreal and distant. The familiar routine of opening the coffee shop, turning on machines, arranging pastries, setting up the register, felt like performing a play she no longer believed in. Around 10 a.m. during the mid-morning lull, the bell above the door chimed. Marlo looked up from the espresso machine she was cleaning and felt her heart skip a beat. The tall man from yesterday was back. Same hoodie and jeans, same friendly demeanor. "Good morning," he said, approaching the counter with a smile. "I wanted to come back and properly thank you for yesterday." "Oh, you don't need to thank me," Marlo said, summoning her customer service voice despite the chaos in her head. "It was really nothing." "It wasn't nothing to me," the man said, and there was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. "I'm Kevin, by the way. Kevin Durant." The name hit Marlo like a physical force, though she tried not to show it. Everyone in Oakland knew that, even people who didn't follow basketball. Kevin Durant, the NBA superstar who had played for the Golden State Warriors, one of the most famous athletes in the world. And she had paid for his coffee with her tip money. "I'm Marlo," she managed to say, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Marlo, I've been thinking about what you did yesterday, and I wanted to ask you something. Why did you pay for my coffee? You didn't know who I was. You had no reason to help me." The question caught her off guard. She had expected him to order something, maybe mention yesterday casually, then leave. She hadn't expected this kind of direct conversation about motivations and kindness. "I don't know," she said honestly. "You seemed embarrassed, and I've been there. Having your card declined is awful, and you looked like a nice person. It was just $4. Kevin studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Just $4, he repeated. "Can I ask you something else? And I want you to be honest with me." Marlo nodded, though she had a feeling she wasn't going to like where this was heading. "Was $4 a lot of money for you?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marlo felt her face flush, and she looked down at the counter. This was the moment where her lie would be exposed, where the generous barista would be revealed as the broke student who had given away money she couldn't afford to lose. "Everyone has $4, she said, which wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. Kevin leaned forward slightly. "Marlo, I've been blessed with a lot of success in my life, and that's taught me to recognize kindness when I see it. Real kindness, the kind that costs something. Yesterday, you didn't just buy me a coffee. You gave me something that had value to you, and you did it without knowing anything about me except that I needed help." Marlo felt tears starting to form in her eyes, and she blinked rapidly to keep them at bay. "It really wasn't a big deal." "Yes, it was," Kevin said gently, "and I think you know it was. Can I ask you one more question?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Are you okay? I mean, financially, personally? Are you doing okay?" The question broke something inside Marlo that she had been holding together through sheer force of will. The tears she had been fighting spilled over, and she wiped them away quickly with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't usually cry at work. I'm fine. Really, You're not fine," Kevin said, and his voice was so kind that it made her cry harder. "Talk to me. What's going on?" And somehow, standing behind the counter of a coffee shop in Oakland, Marlo found herself telling Kevin Durant about her life, about Zephyr and his hearing aids and the tuition deadline, and the way it felt to watch doors close one after another until you couldn't see any way forward. She told him about working 60 hours a week while going to school, about eating ramen for dinner and wearing shoes with holes in them, and calculating whether she could afford to buy milk or eggs, but not both. She told him about their parents' accident, and the way grief had mixed with financial terror to create a kind of desperation she had never imagined possible. Kevin listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finished, they stood in silence for a moment, the coffee shop suddenly feeling very quiet around them. "What's your tuition deadline?" Kevin asked. "Tomorrow," Marlo whispered. "Friday afternoon." Kevin pulled out his phone and started typing. "What's the name of your school? And what do you need for your brother's hearing aids?" "I can't let you help me," Marlo said quickly. "That's not why I told you all this. I don't want you to think I was trying to—" "Marlo," Kevin interrupted gently. "2 days ago, you saw someone who needed help, and you helped without thinking about what it would cost you. You didn't know I could pay you back. You didn't know I was anyone special. You just saw another human being who needed kindness, and you gave it." He looked up from his phone. "Now, I'm seeing someone who needs help, and I can help, so I'm going to. But this is different. Marlo protested. This is thousands of dollars, not $4. This is life-changing money. Kevin smiled, and it was the same warm smile he had given her when she paid for his coffee. $4 was life-changing money for you, and you gave it anyway. The only difference between us is that I have more to give. He finished typing on his phone and looked back at her. I'm going to take care of your tuition and your brother's hearing aid. But more than that, I want to do something else for you. Something that will change your life the way you changed mine. Marlo stared at him, feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. I don't understand. You will, Kevin said. Can you meet me after work today? There's something I want to show you. Marlo spent the rest of her shift in a state of suspended disbelief. Every few minutes, she would touch her phone in her pocket, where Kevin Durant's contact information now lived, like a small miracle she was afraid to examine too closely. He had insisted on paying for her tuition immediately, transferring the money to the school's account while she watched, her hands shaking as she provided the account numbers. But it was his final words that kept echoing in her mind. There's something I want to show you. When her shift ended at 6 p.m., she found Kevin waiting outside the coffee shop, leaning against a black SUV with tinted windows. He had traded his casual hoodie for a button-down shirt, but his demeanor remained the same, warm, approachable, completely lacking in the arrogance she might have expected from someone of his stature. Ready? He asked as she approached. I still don't understand what's happening, Marlo admitted as she got into the passenger seat. The interior of the SUV was luxurious in a way that made her acutely aware of her coffee-stained uniform and worn shoes. You'll understand soon, Kevin said, starting. But first, tell me about your brother. What's he like? As they drove through Oakland, Marlo found herself talking about Zephyr, his intelligence, his determination, the way he had adapted to his hearing loss with a resilience that amazed. She told Kevin about the way Zephyr helped other kids at school who were struggling, how he had taught himself sign language and then taught it to his friends so they could communicate with him better. He sounds like his sister, Kevin observed. Someone who takes care of other people even when he's dealing with his own challenge. They pulled into a residential neighborhood that Marlo recognized but had never explored. The houses here were larger than anything in her area, with well-maintained lawns and the kind of architectural details that spoke of stability and prosperity. Kevin turned into the driveway of a two-story house with a front porch and mature trees in the yard. What are we doing here? Marlo asked as Kevin parked. Instead of answering, Kevin got out of the car and walked to her door, opening it for her. Come on, there's someone I want you to meet. A woman in her 40s answered the front door, greeting Kevin with a warm hug. She was professionally dressed, but had the kind of smile that suggested she was more interested in people than in maintaining appearance. Marlo, this is Sarah Rodriguez. She's a real estate agent and a friend of mine. Sarah, this is Marlo, the young woman I told you about. Sarah shook Marlo's hand with genuine warmth. Kevin has told me so much about you. I'm excited to show you what we've been working on. Show me what? Marlo asked, feeling increasingly confused. Sarah led them through the house, and Marlo found herself in a space that was both beautiful and practical. The living room was spacious but comfortable, with large windows that let in natural light. The kitchen was modern and well-equipped, with a breakfast nook that would be perfect for homework sessions. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms, including one that would be ideal for a teenage boy who needed quiet space to study. What do you think? Sarah asked as they completed the tour. It's beautiful, Marlo said honestly, but I don't understand why you're showing it to me. Kevin and Sarah exchanged a look that Marlo couldn't interpret. Then Kevin pulled something from his pocket, a set of house keys on a simple key ring. Marlo, he said, his voice serious but warm. You paid $4 for my coffee without knowing who I was, without expecting anything in return. That act of kindness meant more to me than you can imagine. It reminded me of why I fell in love with this community, why Oakland will always be home to me. He held out the keys to her. I want to give you something that will change your life, the way you changed mine. This house is yours and Zephyr's. Marlo stared at the key, then at Kevin, then back at the key. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. People didn't give away houses to coffee shop employees who had been kind to them once. I don't understand, she whispered. You paid for my coffee, Kevin said simply. Now I'm paying for your house. But that's... Marlo struggled to find words for the magnitude of what he was suggesting. That's impossible. Houses cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Coffee costs $4. It's not equivalent. You're right, Kevin agreed. It's not equivalent. $4 was a sacrifice for you. This house is not a sacrifice for me. What you gave me was proportionally much more valuable than what I'm giving you. Sarah stepped forward gently. Marlo, the house is fully paid for. No mortgage, no monthly payment. The property taxes and insurance are set up in a trust that will cover them for the next 10 years. All you have to do is live here and take care of it. Marlo felt her knees give way, and she sank into one of the kitchen chairs. This can't be real. People don't do things like this. Some people do, Kevin said, sitting across from her. People who understand that kindness should be rewarded, that generosity should be met with generosity. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped without thinking about the cost to yourself. That's the kind of person who deserves to have good things happen to them. But what if I'm not? Marlo asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest since Kevin first walked into the coffee shop. What if I'm not the person you think I am? What if I'm just someone who made one good decision, but is actually selfish, small, and undeserving of this kind of generosity? Kevin leaned forward, his expression serious. Marlo, I've been in the public eye for a long time. I've met a lot of people who want things from me, who perform kindness because they think it will benefit them somehow. What you did was different. You had no idea who I was, no reason to think your kindness would be rewarded. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Besides, Sarah added with a smile, Kevin has been looking for the right opportunity to do something like this for years. He's been wanting to find a way to give back to Oakland personal, meaningful way. You gave him that opportunity. Marlo looked around the kitchen, trying to imagine herself and Zephyr living here, cooking meals together, doing homework at this table. It seemed like something from a dream, too good and too pure to exist in the real world, where she had learned to expect disappointment. What's the catch? She asked finally. No catch, Kevin said. Just one request. What? When you're a nurse, when you're taking care of people who can't take care of themselves, remember this moment. Remember that sometimes kindness comes back to you in ways you never expected. And when you see someone who needs help, help them. Keep the chain going. Marlo took the keys with trembling hand, feeling their weight like a promise. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, Kevin said, with $4 and a smile when someone needed it. 2 years later, Marlo Chen stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom in her house, adjusting her cap and gown for nursing school graduation. The morning light streaming through windows she still sometimes couldn't believe belonged to her caught the gleam of her nursing pin, a small silver symbol that represented everything she had worked for and more than she had ever dared to hope for. From downstairs, she could hear Zephyr moving around the kitchen, probably making the elaborate breakfast he had insisted on preparing for her graduation day. At 18 now, he had grown into his height and confidence, his new hearing aids allowing him to participate fully in conversations and excel in his advanced placement classes. He was planning to study engineering at UC Berkeley in the fall, his college tuition secured by a scholarship fund that Kevin had quietly established. The local news coverage of Kevin's gift had initially overwhelmed Marlo with its intensity. Reporters had wanted to turn her story into a simple fairy tale. Poor girl helps rich man. Rich man saves poor girl's life. But the reality had been more complex and more meaningful than any headline could capture. There had been criticism, too. Social media commenters who suggested that Marlo had somehow manipulated Kevin, that her kindness had been calculated rather than genuine. Others argued that Kevin's gesture, while generous, highlighted the systemic failures that left people like Marlo struggling to afford basic necessities like education and health care. Marlo had struggled with the attention and the criticism, questioning whether she deserved what Kevin had given. But Kevin himself had helped her navigate those doubts during their regular coffee meeting that had evolved into a genuine friendship. The people who criticize acts of kindness, he had told her one afternoon, are usually people who have forgotten how to be kind themselves. Your job isn't to prove you're worthy of generosity. Your job is to use what you've been given to make the world a little better. And that's exactly what Marlo had done. While finishing her nursing degree, she had started volunteering at a free clinic in Fruitvale, providing basic health care services to undocumented immigrants and low-income families who couldn't afford traditional medical care. She had also begun organizing financial literacy workshops for young adult aging out of the foster care system, teaching them the budgeting and planning skills she had learned through necessity. The most meaningful project, however, had been the creation of the $4 Foundation, a nonprofit she and Kevin had established together. The foundation provided emergency financial assistance to students facing educational crises, small amounts of money that could mean the difference between continuing school and dropping out. They had helped hundreds of students pay for text, cover unexpected fees, and bridge the gap between financial aid and actual costs. "Marlo, are you ready?" Zephyr called from downstairs, his voice carrying clearly through the house thanks to the hearing aids that had transformed his world. "Kevin's here, and he says if you don't come down soon, he's going to eat all the pancakes himself." Marlo laughed, taking one last look at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her bore little resemblance to the exhausted, desperate barista who had counted pennies and skipped meals 2 years ago. This woman stood straight, her eyes bright with purpose and possibility, but the kindness that had started everything was still there, perhaps stronger now that it was backed by stability and hope. Downstairs, she found Kevin sitting at her kitchen table, the same table where she and Zephyr had once eaten ramen for dinner and worried about bills they couldn't pay. Now it was set with a proper breakfast, flowers from her garden, and the easy comfort of a family gathering. "There she is," Kevin said, standing to give her a hug. "How does it feel to be almost Nurse Chen?" "Surreal," Marlo admitted. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "It's not a dream," Zephyr signed and spoke simultaneously, a habit he had developed that made conversations more inclusive for everyone. "It's what happened when good people meet good people." After breakfast, they drove to the community college campus, where Marlo's nursing class would graduate. The ceremony was held in the gymnasium, filled with families celebrating loved ones who had sacrificed everything to pursue their education. Marlo looked out at the audience and saw her chosen family: Kevin and Zephyr, Indira from the coffee shop, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had become like a grandmother to them, and Dr. Martinez, who had served as both professor and mentor. When her name was called, Marlo walked across the stage with steady steps, accepting her diploma from the dean. As she shook hands and posed for photo, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Not just the studying and clinical rotation, but the deeper transformation from someone who survived to someone who thrived. During her valedictorian speech, Marlo spoke about the power of small gestures and unexpected connection. 2 years ago, I made a decision that cost me $4 I couldn't afford to lose, she told the audience. That $4 decision changed my life, not because of what I received in return, but because of what it taught me about the kind of person I wanted to be. She looked out at Kevin, who was sitting in the front row with tears in his eyes. "Someone once told me that kindness isn't about having a lot to give. It's about giving what you have. Whether it's $4 or $4 million, the value of a gift isn't in its size, but in the sacrifice it represents and the love expresses." After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebration, Marlo found herself standing with Kevin outside the gymnasium. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the campus, where she had spent so many evenings rushing between work and classes, always tired, always worried, always hoping. "I have something for you," Kevin said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. Inside was a simple necklace with a small pendant, the number 4 in elegant script. "So you never forget," Kevin said as he helped her put it on. $4, 4 years of nursing school, 400 people you'll help as a nurse, 4,000 lives you'll touch through the foundation. It all started with $4 and a choice to be kind. Marlo touched the pendant, feeling its weight against her chest. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "What?" "I get to keep making that choice every day. I get to wake up in a house you gave me, go to work helping people who need care, and remember that every act of kindness matters, even the $4 ones." Kevin smiled, the same warm smile he had given her that first day in the coffee shop. "Especially the $4 one." As they walked toward the parking lot where Zephyr was waiting with a bouquet of flowers he had grown in their garden, Marlo reflected on the words she had spoken at graduation. The story of her $4 coffee purchase had become local legend, but for her, it remained beautifully simple. Sometimes, when you give what you have to help someone else, the universe finds a way to give back. But more than that, she had learned that the real gift wasn't the house or the tuition money or even the financial security. The real gift was the reminder that she was the kind of person who would pay for a stranger's coffee with her last $4. That knowledge had become the foundation for everything else she built in her life. "Ready to go home?" Zephyr asked as they reached the car. Marlo looked back at the campus one more time, then at the two people who had become her family through love rather than blood. "Yes," she said, getting into the car that would take them back to the house that Love had built. "Let's go home."